The Big Short: Perspectives on the 2008 Housing Bubble. The Big Short: Perspectives on the 2008 Housing Bubble. The Big Short showcases two different perspectives on the 2008 housing bubble. Those who foresaw the impending disaster, like Michael Burry and Steve Eisman. Hey, there's a bubble. How do you know? Trust me. And those who played a direct role in fueling one of the worst financial crises in history. I assume no risk for this product myself, Mark. But while Burry's Big Short eventually paid off, bringing in hundreds of millions for him and his clients, you may not know what happened to the people who drove the crisis with their greed and deception. CDO managers' fraud. At the forefront of that group was this man, played by actor Byron Mann. His character in The Big Short represents Wing Chow, a portfolio manager at Harding Advisory in the early 2000s. The scene in which he sits down with Steve Carell's character at a subprime mortgage convention in Las Vegas actually happened, according to Steve Eisman, whose movie counterpart is named Mark Baum. Yes, it's a bit confusing. Eisman, along with Greg Lippman and their team, traveled to Vegas to witness firsthand the reckless gambling in the financial side of the housing market. That's where he encountered Wing Chow, a CDO manager. A CDO, collateralized debt obligation, is a financial instrument where thousands, sometimes millions of mortgages are bundled together and sold to investors who profit as homeowners make payments. It's an efficient way for banks to transfer risk rather than holding on to large amounts of mortgages. Instead of waiting for decades to collect payments, banks would package these loans into CDOs and sell them for immediate returns. However, during the early 2000s, it became evident that these CDOs, despite receiving AAA ratings from agencies, were loaded with terrible loans. Many were granted to borrowers who already carried heavy debt, had poor credit scores, or in some cases, didn't even have jobs. Well, my firm offers ninja loans, no income, no job. Banks got away with this by leveraging their cozy relationships with CDO managers like Chow. Banks would issue risky mortgages, bundle them into securities, and sell them to CDO managers who, in turn, would buy these subpar loans without thorough examination. In exchange, the banks funneled lucrative clients into the manager's investment funds. Meanwhile, credit rating agencies, which were supposed to ensure quality control, simply rubber-stamped these bonds with high ratings. If one agency refused to comply, banks would just take their business elsewhere. This resulted in a corrupt system where banks, rating agencies, and dishonest portfolio managers effectively colluded, deceiving investors who believed they were purchasing low-risk mortgage-backed assets. In this pivotal moment, Eisman realizes the situation is even worse than he thought, introducing an even riskier financial product: synthetic CDOs. The Big Short: Perspectives on the 2008 Housing Bubble. What? Synthetic CDOs? That sounds insane. No, it's incredible. To keep things simple, synthetic CDOs functioned like insurance for mortgage bonds. Investors like Michael Burry, who anticipated the housing collapse, would pay premiums on these instruments. If the housing market crashed, the synthetic CDO holders would be responsible for massive payouts, much like an insurance company covering car accidents. The shocking part? The synthetic CDO market was 20 times larger than the real mortgage market. This realization struck Eisman. If mortgage defaults ticked up even slightly, the entire financial system could implode. The Big Short: Perspectives on the 2008 Housing Bubble. Following the financial crisis, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, investigated Harding Advisory for fraud. They discovered that Chow made approximately $40 million in fees through his corrupt dealings with Merrill Lynch and hedge fund Magnetar Capital. As a result, he was banned from working with investment advisory firms, prohibited from being an employee, director, or taking any related role. However, according to Reuters, he was only fined $7 million. And after a year, he was eligible to reapply for investment advisory roles. Essentially, he faced minimal consequences. Oh, and he also attempted to sue Michael Lewis, author of The Big Short, and Steve Eisman over his depiction in the book. Chow claimed that Eisman misrepresented their conversation in Las Vegas, particularly regarding his acknowledgement of knowingly selling junk investments. But ultimately, his lawsuit went nowhere. The Big Short: Perspectives on the 2008 Housing Bubble. Then there's this unforgettable moment: Eisman publicly debating legendary investor Bill Miller. This debate took place as mortgage defaults were rising, signaling the beginning of the end. According to Eisman, not only was the debate real, but it was once recorded, though the footage is now lost. Eisman recalls, "There's a tape of me somewhere in this world from that debate. I used to have it, but I lost it." At the time, Bill Miller was the chief investment officer at Legg Mason Capital Management, which had a huge stake in Bear Stearns, one of the banks most exposed to subprime mortgage losses. The debate encapsulated the contrast between Wall Street arrogance and outsiders like Eisman, who saw disaster coming. From the moment the debate started, Bear Stearns stock dropped over 38%. Would you still buy more? Yeah, sure, why not? Boom! Interestingly, Miller's Wikipedia page highlights that he beat the market from 1991 to 2005, which is an impressive track record, but conveniently stops right before the financial crisis. It's like saying, "My house survived every tornado, except the one that destroyed it." That said, nothing bad happened to Miller after the crash. He misjudged Bear Stearns but continued to thrive as a portfolio manager and now runs Miller Value Partners with his son. The $9 billion trading loss. What about the guy who single-handedly lost $9 billion, marking the 5th largest trading loss in history? That would be Howard Hubler, a Morgan Stanley bond trader. He's not explicitly shown in The Big Short, but his story is alluded to in this exchange between Eisman and his boss. Initially, Hubler bet against subprime mortgages as early as 2003, pioneering the use of credit default swaps, CDS, to wager that risky mortgage bonds would fail. This was the same strategy that Michael Burry later used, except Hubler got there first. However, there was a problem. He had to keep paying premiums on his CDS contracts while waiting for the market to collapse. To offset these costs, he made what he assumed was a safe bet. Big mistake. Hubler believed that higher-rated mortgage bonds, AA and AAA, were immune from the crisis, so he sold an enormous amount of CDS protection on these supposedly safe assets. In effect, he became one of the people selling insurance to Michael Burry. Of course, we now know that even AAA-rated mortgage bonds were filled with toxic subprime loans. Hubler's $2 billion correct bet against subprime mortgages was utterly overshadowed by his $15 billion wrong bet on AAA mortgages. What's your exposure? $3 billion. Please don't tell me it's more than 4. It's $15 billion. As the market crumbled, Hubler managed to offload $5 billion in swaps, reducing his exposure to $10 billion. Factoring in the profits from his subprime bets, his final loss was around $8, $9 billion, making it one of the most catastrophic trades in history. The kicker: Eisman's fund, Front Point Partners, was part of Morgan Stanley, so if the bank had gone under, he and his clients would have been wiped out. All this time I've been trying to figure out who I'm betting against, and it's Morgan Stanley, which means it's me. Morgan Stanley was ultimately bailed out by the Federal Reserve, avoiding collapse. This story, like much of the 2008 crisis, reveals how reckless greed and corruption led to catastrophic losses, and in most cases, the people responsible walked away relatively unscathed. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you.